continuing and recasting the gospel story. Hear these words as a new take on the text we read and surrounding the passage. While the political world was concerned with Kalitaka, her message, and her influence, they were mainly intent on determining what to do with and about her. Her words were stirring up the people, but beyond ideas of revolutionary transformation she espoused, there were questions about her identity and the role she would take in the life of the nation and indeed the larger world. Kalitaka called people to effect great changes in their living. That brought with it much speculation as people left and right asked who Kalitaka was. Specifically, they were intent on determining if she were the long-awaited one, the one prophesied of long ago to bring deliverance to the nations. Was she the one on whom they should pin their hopes, dreams, and expectations? Some of the people gained the courage to put the question to her directly. Are you the one we have long awaited? She had nothing in declaring she was not the one they expected. She was simply preparing the ground for the one who would follow her. It was this other one on whom their expectations from prophecy were pinned. It was this other one whom they needed to be ready to heed. She was simply a herald, coming beforehand, the advance party to make preparations for the coming one. Her charge and task was getting them ready to listen in anticipation of what the promised one would say and do. Despite her declarations about who she was and that she was not the one they anticipated, many found this hard to believe. They wanted to cast her as the long-awaited one on whom their hopes were pinned. They wanted to take her as Messiah, the center of their hope, the one on whom they would depend, burdening her with fulfilling their dreams, their versions of the coming era. Kalitaka did not seem to fit any norms and expectations. She lived a new paradigm as she did not embrace the consumerism so integral to the cultural norms. She did not bother with the aesthetic preoccupations around clothing, decor, and exotic cuisine, or the latest innovations in transportation, housing, and technology. She did not live as the Amish, yet there was something to their simplicity and a historical appreciation of long ago norms that found echo in Kalitaka's dress and presentation. She did not embody their preoccupation with legalistic concerns of a particular heritage and point in time. Yet, she dressed in hemp cloth, crafted her own moccasins, and ate the wild produce of her environment: insects, mushrooms, leaves, berries, and other products of the Creator's wild provision. These were her sustenance. People flocked to hear her speak, inviting her to various venues, but also going to campgrounds and fields where her presence was being forecast on social media sites and various news outlets. As she spoke to crowds, she called them to commit to change. She called them to turn their attention and hopes from personal material wealth and comfort onto that which builds the welfare of an entire society. She challenged them to be baptized as a commitment expression. They were to begin new lives with a focus on the social order rather than their ruggedly individualistic pursuits. Berkeley was governor at the time, while Dawson had taken the reins of the Evangelical Partners Association, and Bickett was leading up the conservative media caucus. Kalataka had called Berkeley out publicly for marrying the younger daughter of his brother, raising his ire as a personal grudge. The three met with their closest advisors to discuss strategies for dealing with Kalataka. They were leery of her influence, but her popularity made taking any direct action risky. They sent a contingent of agents to question her publicly while hiding any association with themselves. They would determine that attacking her credibility through forcing her into an untenable corner should prove most effective. These agents began asking Kalataka public questions and feeding distrust to expand the impact of their questioning. They asked, "Who are you to baptize people? Are you the coming one?" She replied, "No, I am not the one you await." They asked, "Then are you the prophet of old returned to announce Messiah's arrival?" She told them, "No, I am simply one voice crying out in the fields. Get your act together and prepare yourselves in anticipation of God's action in your midst. Give God's purposes your highest priority if you would be ready for Messiah's coming." Others who were instigated to question came forward for baptism, but Kalataka responded to them, "You horde of scorpions, you offspring of gators, hornets, and wild boars, why do you come to be baptized when you have not the least interest in changing your ways? Do you think a simple rite changes your standing before God? Though I rinse the dust from your heads, your hearts and minds remain unchanged. How will a thimble of water protect you from the wildfires of condemnation? Get your lives together as proof of your transformation. Belonging to a faith tradition has no meaning at all before God when you have not allowed God an inch to change your lives. A racehorse descended from man of war is worthless if it will not run. The rocks under your feet are more malleable in God's hands than your obstinate lives shackled by greed. I baptize you with water, but there is another one already in your midst who will immerse you in the very breath of the Holy One. He will baptize you in the very word, breath, and fire of God's mouth. While you grumble and argue, vying for power and position, this other one will bring God's fullness into your midst. Beware, you don't become enemies of God. These things happened mostly at the banks of the Catawba, where there were fields for the crowds, where they could gather in audience for Kalataka. Among those coming to be baptized, Joshua made his way to be likely baptized by and associated with Kalataka and her message. She balked at his coming, telling him, "You should be the one baptizing me." Joshua responded, saying, "Let it be for now, that all might see that my words are tied with your own." Kalataka acquiesced, and when he came up from the waters, there were clashes like thunder in the heavens, like a triumphant sound of victory in God's presence. It was as though God were proclaiming aloud, "This is the one who is my own. He is the one to heed and follow. Give him your attention." The next day, Kalataka saw Joshua and mentioned to some of her closest followers, "There goes the Lamb of God who will carry the burden of the world's sin, shame, and rejection. The weight of man's sin will fall on him as the powerful respond in violence to God's purposes. This is the one I told you would immerse you in the very breath of God. I had a vision of a dove coming from the heavens and alighting on him at his baptism, with a heavenly voice claiming him as Son of God." Meanwhile, Kalataka remained in Berkeley's sights, and before long he found a way to imprison her while he determined how best to proceed. He hoped that charges of interference with matters of state might silence her and related voices speaking against him and challenging his ability and fitness to remain in office. He was also concerned with her attacks on unregulated capitalism that disdained human lives. She was taken out of circulation, but her words still found purchase in the lives of many who had listened to her, watched her actions, and reflected on the substance of her life. Imprisoned, she remained a threat. How do you kill an idea? How do you excise it from the public consciousness once it has taken